So, welcome everyone. This is our final webinar of our winter series. My name is Katie Wilkinson and I'm the Wilder Communities team leader. I do recognise a couple of names that have turned up tonight, so welcome along. Yes, I'm Wilder Communities team leader at Devon Wildlife Trust, and we also have Emma, the Wilder Communities officer, and she's working behind the scenes tonight doing all the techie bits. Tonight we will be delving into the world of community gardens, and we have some great speakers who have kindly volunteered their time to chat about the garden that they're involved in, which we hope will give you lots of inspiration for your own projects. We do hope this session will be really useful, but we do welcome any feedback or ideas for future events that you'd like to see, and there will be a feedback form at the end. So, please be honest and, let us know, if you enjoyed the session. So before I hand over to the first speaker, we have a super quick poll question that we'd like you to take part in. So it should pop up on your screen any moment. And this is just to gauge where you are currently with being part of a community garden or thinking about being part of a community garden. It should pop up any second. There we go. So the answers are: I'm part of a community gardening group already. I'm planning on setting up a community garden project. I'm not part of a group but interested in getting involved. And then I'm not sure what community gardening is. No right or wrong answer here. I'll just give that a moment. Cool. A real mixture, actually. If I just share. Oh, I can't share it. Can you see that? Can you see the poll? Oh, you can. So yeah, a real mixture, which is great. So thank you for doing that. Right, let's get started with our speakers. So first up, we have Clemence from St Thomas Community Garden in Exeter. So Clemence got started with the St Thomas Garden as just a local resident who used the compost bins in the community garden. She then started to look after the garden and worked on setting up a group. And it all happened really organically for her. And before she knew it, she was hooked. Clemence decided to go part-time in her job, retrain in horticulture, growing and community gardening, and now works a day a week on an organic farm, along with her other job. Clemence had never done anything like this before, just allotment growing. So it just goes to show what you can do. So Clemence, over to you. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Okay, thank you, Katie. So it's very nice to be here and to share this story with you and what we've been doing at the garden. So when I started looking after using the compost bin, the garden had been set up previously in a local park. It's in St Thomas Pleasure Grounds in Exeter, so it's on council land, and it has been established by the school and Blooming St Thomas previously, but then it wasn't looked after for a different reason, and then so little by little I start to look after this plot of land, and we had a sign on the fence saying, well, community garden, and I was on my own there, and I thought, well, we actually need to set up a group. So I worked on that, and then we had like a new group of volunteers around 2019, and we worked on extending the garden. So I'll show you some picture in a minute. So the garden is it's a stripe of land in the park, and it's about 5 meters width by 150 meter long, and it's like there's the old plot and the new plot that we've redeveloped in 2020, and then after that we also set up like a community group. So we are organized with a constitution, so it's how it works. We've got like regular meetings and an AGM once a year, and it's all run by volunteers, and we run weekly session on Sunday morning at the moment. So there are a few pictures of the redevelopment in the next slide. So we see it gives an idea of like the shape of the garden, and we could see like a group of volunteers working on extending the plot. So at the back is the older plot, the new plot is bigger. So it gives an idea of all the work that's been done. So the council has been kind of helping preparing the ground with issues around the use of herbicide, for instance. So we talked about that. That was quite an interesting process. We can discuss maybe later in the question. And that's all material that we recycle from the council yard as well. So we see like the work being done. And on the next slide, we see like a few pictures of the gardens throughout the season. So that's mainly a picture of the new plot, and we see that the two different plots are separated by an area of wildflowers. So it's like a small wildflower meadow, but we decided not to plant because we grow. I'll go to that in a minute. Our main work is to grow vegetable and fruits, but we work with wildlife, and also because people used the wall to jump into the park, to the street, we decided not to cultivate this area, so people can use it and won't have to jump as well in the vegetables to go across, because that's the route that people use, and that's the way as well for us to grow food, vegetable, and fruit in a wildlife friendly way. And work with wildlife and encourage biodiversity in the park, which maybe the biodiversity is not super rich, but that's a work that could be done to study a bit more. So in the next slide, we'll see some produce, because that's the focus of the work. I guess, I mean, some people in the poll said like they were not sure about what community gardening is. I think there's so many different ways of doing community gardening, and with emphasis in different elements. So our emphasis and what we're interested in is in growing good vegetables and fruits, so chemical-free, sustainable, for the community, with the community. So we produce. What we do with the produce we grow, we share them among volunteers. We have a little stall that we can see here. Passerbys as well come and take some produce, the produce they like. And we've been trying to work a lot as well with the local community. So some shop take some salads. We have it's all started again without like planning, a bit more like it happened. We had like surplus produce, loads of salads, loads of chard, loads of kale. So some shops took that and it started, and then we started to grow this relationship. And we also been working with an organization called Love Food CIC, who used to do community lunch clubs in very close by. And we're going to do that again in the near future. So we used to produce, to bring salad mainly, but some other produce to that for the community lunch. So that was really good way of engaging with the community. And these are some flowers as well from the garden to put on the table. So on the next slide we see some of our work. So we have like weekly session with volunteers with the group on the Sunday morning, but we also have like different events. throughout the year, but the main event, I would say, are the Open Day as part of the Good to Grow Day, which is a national day celebrating community growing across the UK. So basically, you register your garden there, and you have like an activity during the day. And this year is going to be a Good to Grow week. So these are some pictures of that event. So that's one of the main one we're doing, and the other one is the St. Thomas Winter Fair. So it's very local, or winter market, very nice market in November in the neighborhood, and always come with a stall and plants. So that's and produce. So that's and then we've done like one-off cookery demos again with Love Food CIC. So it's on the left. A picture of that, and we've been working as well with the local theatre, Alibi Theatre, because they had like a 2 years of activity around St. Thomas heritage and St. Thomas stories. So we had like various we did some events as well in the garden with them. So it's so that's one of the work we've done, is like working really closely with the community. So we can see that on the next few images, like here, of the activity, whether it's the Good to Grow events or the work with the theatre. And on the next slide, again, some more example of work with the community. So it's another very important aspect for us is like around the park, there's a lot of home for older people and residential homes, and the park is like a very important place for these people who come for like a walk, a chat, and meet people. So we've been like engaging with quite a few of the residents of the neighborhood, and one of the very important person was Elizabeth, that we used to see every Sunday. She used to be a very keen gardener, and she used to love the produce from the garden. So here we see her with, I think, some carrots, and she used to grow in a family. They used to grow peas, which are called, they've been labeled, they're called Uncle Fred's peas. And they've been, so now we can get them at Gardening Organic or something like that. But Elizabeth like provided us with this variety of pea that we grow for her, and we actually grow them as well with the local seed bank. We worked together. So that was, and unfortunately she passed away last year, but we've been working and engaging with this part of the community as well from the beginning, really, because, and again, it's organic because it's the people who use an important part of the population using the park. So that's this, and so on the next slide we see another part of, like, let's say, like gardening, community gardening, but also community work. So it was important for us because we've been working, like, we're trying to work in a sustainable way, being self-sufficient, and I started using the garden through the compost, but also there were, at the time when we started to set up this community compost, there were no council collection of kitchen waste. So that was very important for us to do that. But it is when we got the boxes installed that when the council starting to do the collection, which is very good. But then we were like left with a bit without like compost for so we had a project with Nikki Scott, who's like an expert in compost and community composting. So we've been working with him to set up this community compost, and we've been working since a little bit with the residents, but very, very closely with a local cafe on Corwicks, on the next on the street, very local to us. And so some of our volunteers go twice a week to collect the compost from the cafe and bring it to the garden. So it's how another important of our the work with the community. And then on the next slide, I'd like to say just a few words. I'm not sure I have much time, but on working with wildlife and gardening with wildlife. So it's also something that is very important for us from the beginning, and because you can't grow good produce without working with wildlife, and wildlife make the park as well more beautiful, etc. So and more engaging as well. So these are some of the pictures, like the picture with the animals, are very recent pictures taken by volunteers, and we share that on WhatsApp group, so we can see that it's something that is very important for the people in the group. And also we've got like a hedgehog box, and this hedgehog that has spent like the winter in a hedgehog hospital, and he came back in the park like a few weeks ago after he got like a bit better after the winter. And these are some picture of the wildflower or the flower we plant sown, and of the sowing as well. We did actually with you at the Devon Wildlife Trust. So the next slide is just say a few words about the work with that we've been doing, or with the Devon Wildlife Trust. Is like, but we've been in touch. I don't know how it all started, but I started meeting member of your team and discussing about the work we've been doing, and thanks to that as well, where we had seeds for the meadow, and we got the award, like the wildlife friendly garden, and very recently the Wilder Community Award as well. And a few words on the next slide about the challenges as well. So it's all been a learning curve, because I had no experience in doing that before, and people on the team, like the other volunteers as well, had no experience. We had all like different experiences in life, and they were all useful, I suppose, but nothing like that. So we learned, and some of us did like training, and yeah, and like just like learning from scratch, but that was really really nice. Then we so that's one thing. So it's like navigating a bit. The other thing is like all being volunteers, because I think that's one of the main challenge, is like to have something that is to create a garden that is resilient and to keep it going. You need really to be involved and really to be there, and to keep a group of volunteers, and all volunteers as well. And that sometimes is difficult in terms of like engagement and commitment, and like going every Sunday morning. And it's just like so that's one thing. So it's related to the issue of funding. I would say like funding is we apply for grant, we get a bit of money from there, and for instance, to get like a shed, to get the compost bin, to get some plants, to do some events. So we managed quite easily, I think, but I think it would be nice to maybe to have working staff to make the garden, like it works like that, but until everybody needs to be on board, and it makes it a bit not completely sustainable and resilient, I would say. So that's one thing. The other thing as well is like an issue. We've been like, all our gates are open to everybody, because the gate were open, and it was very nice because we can see the children coming in to see the plant and taste produce, and so that's been amazing. And people like discovering what's in the garden. So we never had like so one of the big question we have is like, do you have any anti-social behavior? And we always say, well, never. Actually, it's been like amazing. But I think last year we started to have like loads of produce disappearing, which is not really antisocial behavior, because it's like, well, they are produce and people help themselves, but it was a bit hard on us, because we do the work and we see like, well, there are loads of like squash waiting there, or cucumber, and you go the day after and there's nothing left, and it's a bit hard. So with this kind of issue, but we decided that we want to keep the gate open, and so that's the choice we make as well. So this kind of issues. And then, well, I thought like working with wildlife, I would put that here because in particular, like we had loads of trouble with hedgehogs, which I mean, like it's more like finding hedgehog which look sick, but you don't know whether they're sick or not, and you don't have the expertise or the knowledge, and that has been a bit like sometimes a bit hard. And I feel like, yeah, it's a different, sometimes it's a different set of knowledge and skills and also to find the right partners. For instance, for the hedgehog now we've got a person who we work with, and it's good and it helps and it makes you feel like better, like you have someone who knows things. So that was like a few points I wanted to say, and it would be nice to discuss anything. Yeah, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Clemence. That was really great. There's Clemence's details there. Oh, they're gone. Do you want disappeared? Do you want to just flick them up again, just quickly, Emma, before we move on to the next speaker? We'll take questions at the end, I think, Clemence, just so that everyone can, you know, do their presentations, and then we'll do questions at the end. There's a couple that have come through. I've just got one quick question though, while that's up on the screen. I think it might have been answered. So is the Good to Grow week that week leading up to the 28th of April?
Yes, it's from the 22nd to the 29th actually this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Brilliant. Right. Thank you. Okay, so next speaker up is John. And John, hold on, let me just, here we go. So John is our very own Cricklepit Mill garden volunteer. So he's the volunteer head gardener at our office's garden, basically in Exeter, Devon Wildlife Trust garden. He's been volunteering there for nearly 12 years and has been the volunteer head gardener and leader of the group since 2016. John and the team of volunteers have done a fabulous job of evolving the garden every year. And since 2016, they have achieved outstanding in the RHS It's Your Neighbourhood awards. So over to you, John.
Thank you. Excuse me, if everybody can hear me. As Katie introduced, yeah, I'm a volunteer head gardener for Cricklepit Mill Wildlife Garden. Cricklepit Mill is a listed building, grade 2, which the trust moved to over nearly 15 years ago now. And there wasn't much there. It was a former industrial site, really. It's been derelict for a little while, so there was quite a bit of work done. So thank you for that. So this is basically this was kindly donated, some photos somebody took in 2006. So this is what the site looked like. This is before the trust moved in. Some work had started on making the mill waterproof and etc. Devon Historic Buildings Trust, I think, if I remember rightly, put in some money. So this is early days. This is a wet November in 2013. The group that I could organise have been going for just under a year. We sort of started doing things. I don't know if you see on the photo on the left of the lead. There's a patch of bare earth. That's where we used to do an annual meadow mix, things like cornflowers, poppies, etc. And there's just over to the left, we've done our third scheme, which is called Bee and Butterfly Border. But it was still very much, you know, a work in progress at that point. Move on to the next slide. To sort of now, basically, this was taken fairly recently on a rare sunny day in winter. Seems to be mostly wet this winter, but this is a rare sunny day. So this is taken from the decking, which is up in between the garden and the mill itself. you can see across the sculpture in question is Dragonfly. That's a memorial to two members of staff who sadly passed away. So it's sort of fitting and molds them. You can see across to the main part of the garden. You can sort of see the transformation. We've got ponds, there's a bug hotel, and seating and stuff. So it's just to get a sort of flavour of where we started from and where we are now in terms of where we've gone in the garden. You go back, thanks. On the wildlife, go on to the next slide now, thanks. So just some wildlife spotting. We're lucky, considering it's in an urban location, we do get a really good wildlife in the garden. These are just some examples. So there's a Jersey tiger moth. That's on our Welcome to Cricket garden sign, which viewers see when they come into the garden. Middle one is a brimstone, which I took earlier this month. I happened to be lucky, I happened to be there. Saw the yellow and realised it was very early brimstone for the year, butterfly. And then the one on the right, it's not very good, but on the top of the ladder is a kingfisher. That was my first ever sighting of the kingfisher at a crickle pit. I was sort of seeing blue flashes, but he stayed there for a while. And as you can see, we get regular duck visitors on the leads. If you move on to the next one, thanks. So what's the role of the garden? So this is something we've agreed with the Devon Wildlife Trust. It's to demonstrate to people how they can make space for nature within their own gardens. The photo is an example of the Bug Hotel, which we've recently renovated. You don't have to be this grand. Ours is filling up space in the retaining walls to the garden. But it just shows an example of reusing materials. We've got oak bricks, pots, canes, bamboo, bits of old wood you can use to make something simple like that as a residence for insects. And in the past, we have been pretty good at actually getting leafcutter bees, mason red bees as well, to actually nest in their eggs, which normally hatch in the summer. So we're hoping again that we'll get some attracted in there again. The garden, I suppose, is sort of small scale in terms of its size compared to, say, other gardens, like some of the national trust properties, but it has a large impact in terms of what we try and show in the garden and demonstrate in the garden, the various beds and things that we've got in the garden. And we have had a good impact in terms of improving the flora and fauna within the garden over the last 10 years or so that we've been doing it. And just create learning opportunities. It is accessible. It's there's ramps and it's flat for most so people can access. We got information, a welcome to sign, and we've also got little information boards. On the photograph, you can see at the bottom is just an explanation of the Bug Hotel, what it's there for and its purpose. We've got other similar such little signs around the garden just to explain to people that visit what the purpose of the different areas of the garden are for, to demonstrate. Move on to the next slide. Thank you. So how we work a bit more. When we first started, we sort of had to beg, borrow, and not quite steal, but we were lucky we got some donations, and now we have a sort of dedicated budget. It's not huge, but it's still pretty good compared to other people. We are sort of lucky, but we do try and be sustainable and repurpose materials, try and keep costs down. Examples there you've got is the guttering for the water butts. The water butts came from the recycling centre in Exeter, from the shop, as did the guttering. Table on the right, my volunteer who's there with the pink watering can made a propagating table. It's partly out of pallets, partly out of spare wood, and the tabletop is a no DWT sign cut up. So that just shows what we do in terms of reusing materials. We're very good. My team of volunteers are very good at dumpster diving. When the trust are prone to throwing stuff out, we rescue things and reuse them, to save money. I mean, the rainwater is one thing. We've got 2 sheds now, and we've got 3 water vats. Sheds sort of moved about, but they do collect water. They've been pretty full over this winter. And we use that for the ponds that we've got in the garden during the summer when it's, with hotter summers that we've been getting. We needing to keep the ponds topped up. So most of the water from the vats keep the ponds in good order. I think that's sort of it. I mean, we sort of make space. I mean, where the sheds are is sort of, we're in a sort of gap where it's quite shady. We've got the willow tree just to the right. So it's a sort of great spot. I mean, we feed the birds there as well. Thanks, Em. You can move on to the next slide. How do we maintain volunteer numbers? It's over the years, it's been a bit up and down, but mostly we retain long-term volunteers. I'm the longest, but a couple of the other volunteers have been volunteering for between 5 and 10 years. We lost a few during the COVID pandemic. They decided to give up for various different reasons. But we're back to having a steady group again. And I try and utilize the different skills of the group. Steve, the other chap on my volunteer group, he's very good at doing DIY, carpentry, so any of the things like the Bug Hotel, he's created. One of my other volunteers, Maria, she's very good at growing fruit and veg, so I utilize her skills, and she's got a large allotment, so she handles the sort of the fruit and veg side of the garden. We do have a little small patch that we demonstrate where you can grow fruit and veg in a small space. So that's one thing. And they all have sort of different skills really. And we sort of gel together. We always, try and encourage people to come up with some ideas, and they do, in terms of what we can do in the garden. And we should share ideas. Socializing, we always have a cup of tea after our session on a Wednesday afternoon, cake on people's birthdays. It just sort of helps, to gel the team. And we go out for walks and trips. We've just recently been out to Budley Sutton Estuary to see the work that's been done there by the Environment Agency in Clinton, Devon Estates. And we were very lucky to see a beaver whilst we were there. Emma's seen the photo. Most unusual to see a beaver out during the day, but we struck lucky. So we try and go and view DWT's nature reserves and other gardens. It's good, good for morale. It's good to get out and do something different and go and see other places. And we can move on to the last slide. So I was asked to give some top tips for how we've successfully run our community garden. Share your spaces. What we do, the garden is open during the week, Monday to Friday. Freely for people to walk around. And it gives volunteer opportunities to explore their interests. As I previously stated, my volunteers have sort of different interests. Steve, who's well as being good at carpenter, is a good birder. So whenever we go out on trips, he'd always spot things far quicker than we can and say what they are. I mean, I'm okay, but he's very good. General, it takes time to be patient. I mean, it's taken us 10 years to get where we are. We're happy now. We've developed most of the garden now. It's just sort of tinkering around the edges with the garden now. It's pretty much established. And set real objectives of the project. When we first started, we didn't really have a plan. We sort of did that. I mean, my predecessor, who was head gardener for the first few years, he sort of set the ball rolling. I took it on really. We have a management plan for the garden now, which we agree with Devon Wildlife Trust in terms of projects and how the garden fits in with the work that the trust are doing. And we set realistic objectives in terms of cost, resources and stuff. We'd like to do more, but circumstances dictate that we can only do so much each year, and so we stick to that. Prepared for failures. Oh God, I've lost count of the amount of plants we've lost because they've died for whatever reason, whether it's disease or weather. I suppose our most spectacular failure was our bog garden, which has now been replaced by a shallow garden. When we put a new larger pond in, we had thought a good idea to put a bog garden next to it. Sadly, it's far too sunny a position, and with the sort of increasing hot summers that we're having, it was just impossible to keep too wet. So we bit the bullet and cleared it and created a shallower pond with more marginal plants in. So you learn from experience in terms of what can go right and what can't go wrong. The other message is get help. I mean, we're lucky that because we're with Devon Wildlife Trust, we've got access to help, including, of course, the wonderful wider communities team. And we get help from the other members, ecologists and stuff as well, the fundraising team, the community communications team, if we want to share experiences of wildlife in the garden. And I guess the other one is like knowledge share, get support from, there's plenty of really good community gardening groups. I can only speak for experience in Exeter, but there's, some really good groups now in Exeter, too many to mention. But, try and get that share knowledge and help. And particularly on like fundraising, for example, I know we put a bid in a couple of years ago. DWT sort of did it on our behalf, but I know my assistant head gardener and I were like, what do we put? What is it they want to know? It was from South West Water, and we couldn't have done it without the help of one of the fundraisers for DWT, because it's new. It was a new thing for us. So if you can get help, explore and utilize everybody's skills. You never know how much you volunteers as to somebody might suddenly have a particular skill that's handy for doing whatever project you're doing. And that's it really. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much, John. You're very modest. It's a lovely, lovely garden, and all the staff love having their lunch out there. It's really nice. And just to quickly answer Jeremy's question, yes, it is open to the public. It's only open when we're in the office though, so usually basically Monday to Friday, essentially 9 till 5. But yeah, you can wander around, come in and wander around. So yeah, during the week. So great, thank you so much, John. Okay, we'll move on to our final speakers. So we've got Tess and Stefan from the Sidmouth Food Forest, and Stefan was a market gardener for several decades, specialising in greenhouse and outdoor salads, but had always wanted to focus more on perennials and edimentals. Now, this is the first time I'd heard the word edimentals. So edimentals are plants that are both ornamental and edible. So I love that. And then Tess was growing plants in harmony with nature for many years at home, and after a recent career change, began to do this professionally for others as a gardener. Her aim is to support her customers, whatever their own experience or knowledge, to benefit wildlife. When Tess and Stefan met, they soon discovered that they had a similar vision to create a different kind of community garden, which would evolve slowly to eventually sustain itself, the local community and wildlife. The quarter of an acre food forest in Sidford is providing the opportunity to grow different crop types in a community setting to provide both food and a home for wildlife. So over to you, Stefan and Tess.
Just give me a moment and get the slides up. And there we are, I hope. Can you see that okay?
Yep, I can see that. You might want to change it to
Yes, I'm trying to, and the slide's coming over the top. Let me just close it. Let me just move it onto another screen. Is that better?
yeah, that's a bit better.
Okay. So Sidmouth Community Garden, the emphasis being on community, because we very much are a community garden. I've got the wrong slides showing, just a moment. For some reason, they won't move forward. No, nothing's moving. No. Would you like to put the slides on from your end? Might that be better?
Yeah, no problem. If you want to stop sharing your screen, Stefan, then I'll share from this side.
Right.
2 seconds.
It'll be shared them, isn't it? Excellent, thanks. I can see those now anyway. That's good. So yes, very much a community garden. If we like to go on to the second slide, which is probably more important. As you can see, the photograph on the left-hand side is part of the garden as we took it on. It was actually a garden before. It belongs to East Devon District Council, but it had been being managed by a preschool group, which during COVID stopped, just ceased being a preschool group, disappeared. Land had been left then, and it's gradually going backwards. A lot of the facilities they put, they had spent an awful lot of money on it, with fencing it and putting in a pond and various other bits and pieces. It was beginning to deteriorate, so the first thing we had to do was tidy it up, get rid of all the rotting wood, the dangerous wood and everything else that was in there from some of the structures. And we were left with a quarter-acre plot that had a few large birch trees on it, a pond which was fenced off, and a lot of grass. And of course, if you're trying to produce a garden to produce food, grass isn't the thing you really want. So the first task really was to cover the grass so that we could actually start managing it for all the things we wanted it to do. And we tried a method that I thought would work and was actually surprising and working far, far better than I expected. And that was just to cover it in wood chip. And it seemed a very natural way to do things because we're talking about a food forest, emphasis on the forest. So dead wood on the floor in terms of wood chip seemed a natural way of doing things. We tried two ways of doing this. One was to put cardboard on the ground, very much the no dig type method with compost on top. In this case, our compost would be wood chip. And that worked very well, but then we ran out of cardboard some days when we were there working and just put wood chip down. And be honest, you cannot tell the difference afterwards. Both work very, very effectively. So when I said the emphasis on the community, we've got a group of people now come on a fairly regular basis, about once a month. It's quite a low maintenance garden, even though it's quite big. And the main work at the moment is just ferrying in as much wood chip as we can. We have it delivered. Only on one or two occasions have we actually managed to get to the site because they have to come over a sports field. And with all the wet weather in the winter and most of the summer and that, they've had to dump it on a car park nearby. So we've been using wheelbarrows to ferry it on site, which is quite a time-consuming, but an interesting job to do. You fill a barrel and have a chat with someone else that's filling their barrel, then you both move it down to the garden and drop it off, and it becomes very much social, and that emphasis again on the community. But of course, the other thing that's important is that we wanted to encourage biodiversity, and the few tadpoles there were in our pond last year. The pond has seen better days. It's leaking like mad. But last year we suddenly had quite a lot of water come into it with rain. Frog spawn suddenly appeared. The water started to drain away again, and we thought that was it. The frog spawn had finished. Went one day and it was virtually empty. Thought that was it. But a few days later, it rained again, and the next thing we knew, we had frog spawn there, and sorry, the tadpoles there. And I have seen the odd frog around the area. The sort of environment it's in, they're not easy to say, but they are about. And of course, the last thing, of course, is vegetables. Now, these are beetroot in some modules. They weren't planted down there, they were a total farm garden. But the reason I put them there is to emphasize how we can grow small plants in plugs like that and then transplant them into the garden, into the food forest. And also that really there's an overlap between what we can do in our gardens and what we can then take into the food forest. So for example, one of the plants we're growing there, and you mentioned perennials earlier, I'm interested in perennials. We've got perennial kale. Now, all the perennial kale in the food forest will all come from my garden, because I had one plant growing in my garden. One plant was plenty enough to feed me and my family over the winter, but by taking some cuttings from it and planting them down there after they'd established, we've now got a number of perennial kale plants growing on the plot. And it's quite interesting that whereas the ones that in my garden at home were decimated last year by cabbage white, in fact, they are every year by cabbage white caterpillars, the ones in the food forest weren't. And whether this is because they're spread out a bit more, you've got a more diverse planting structure there or not, I don't know. And I was really, really pleased and said to someone, look, it's great. We've had no cabbage white problems here at all. Went the next week and they've been decimated by cabbage white butterflies. So, you know, these things sometimes go wrong, as was being mentioned elsewhere. If you can go to the next slide, please. One of the things we wanted to do was to think about what is a food forest. And I don't know how many of you know what a food forest is. It's a term that hasn't been used in this country a lot in recent years. It's very much the way that in tropical and subtropical regions, they grow food plants in the forests round about the villages. And clearly that's not the environment we live in here. And food forests were termed in the last 20 or 30 years in this country and were presented as being something new, but I maintain they've never been something new, that we've always had food forests in this country. My grandfather had a 5-acre orchard just outside of Exeter, near Pinhole. And I remember back in the 50s when that was actually a food forest. It was an orchard growing cider apples for the local cider industry, but all the hedges round about it were a whole mix of different plants that were harvested. And in amongst the trees, we're growing lots of other things, you know, that were harvested on a regular basis. And during the 40s, the 30s and the 40s, during the wars, my grandfather fed his family partly from his 5-acre plot of what I would term as a food forest. But there is a conventional way now of looking at food forests, and they comprise of a number of layers. And you'll see there under the table of contents on the left-hand side there on that particular slide. It's a slide taken from our website. We've put together a lot of information on our website, and there we've listed the different layers. There's the canopy layer, the tall trees, in other words, the vine layer, the vines that grow up through the trees. And you might think, well, what vines do we grow in this country? Well, last week I planted some hops. They're the ideal vine layer. And hops are great. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of fun harvesting and using the hops. There's the lower tree layer, and that's the things like the apple and plum trees. We've got a mulberry tree, for example, growing on the plot. You then got the lower shrub layers, the herbaceous layers. Things like the perennial kale would be herbaceous. The photograph on the right-hand side at the top is Alexander's. Most people would say, well, that's a wild plant. It's not a garden plant. But it used to be a garden plant. It would have been found in every cottage garden in the 17th century because it was brought to this country by the Romans. So not a UK plant, but something that's been grown in this country for many, many years. We then got the sort of grain layer, grain covered layer as well. And I'm thinking there of things like, one of the things we put in is a lot of mint. And I know a lot of people will say to us, well, oh, mint, that's very, very invasive. Yes, it is to an extent. In other words, it will cover the ground quickly. But what I'm really looking for there, and Tess and I have talked about this a lot, is why there isn't it, is something that will cover the ground quickly, but is actually quite easy to get rid of, because if you're growing it in a very thick layer of wood chip, then actually it's very, very easy to pull it on the ground. You just pull over the leaves and it comes up, rhizomes a lot. So it's going to be very easy to clear an area and plant something else into it as the food forest evolves. Because that's the other issue we've got at the moment, is that it's a very new area. We've only been using it now for just over a year. If you go down to the day, there's very little growing. There's lots and lots of wood chip. But there's a lot of stuff under the ground as well that will be coming up shortly. The rhubarb is beginning to come through, for example, and various things like that. So we will see things growing. And there are plants that you may not see elsewhere. For example, we've got one called Hablitsia. Some of you may know it as Caucasian spinach. Really, really hard to find in this country until recent years. And it's an interesting story of where our plant came from. I bought it from Incredible Vegetables at Ashburton, but they got it from a guy that I'm aware of who lives up in the Arctic Circle in Norway. And this plant had virtually died out across Europe, but is now having a renaissance. And we've got a couple of plants in the food forest, and they're a lovely vegetable early in the season, eating either the shoots, or later as they become a climber and go up through the trees, you can harvest the leaves as a salad crop. So there's a whole range of things that we introduce people to that are new. And the last layer we've got are the underground layer, basically, the things that grow underground, the fungi, the mushrooms, and all that sort of plant, and of course the root crops. One of the things we've got to be careful of with being a community area open to the public will be this idea of people coming in and harvesting fungi. It's something that worries me a great deal, so it's something we discourage. We don't want to encourage too much fungal growth, but of course, we are growing on wood chip. Of course, there's fungal growth there. So there is an education issue coming up here as well for us to look at. If we go to the next slide, please. One of the things that we wanted to do quite early on was to try to get organised and think about what we were going to do. And East Devon District Council, before they let us have the site, take it over, they were worried about insurance, which we had to sort out fairly quickly, and also a risk assessment. Obviously, we're going on the council land, managing it for them. They were worried about the risk to them and their reputation and such like, which is quite understandable. So we sat down and wrote a management plan before we did anything else, before we put in any wood chip or anything at all. And that's the management plan there. It actually is much bigger than what you can see there. It's a sort of a scrolling page on the website and runs to, I forget how big it is, a few thousand words maybe. But it sort of allowed us to sit down and think, well, what are we going to do? Why are we doing it? Who's it for? How are we going to manage it? And that was the plan there. And we've kept fairly well to it, I think, it's fair to say. In that plan, they were also keen that we didn't put in any invasive plants. One of the plant list of what we were going to plant there. I'll be honest, I didn't have a clue what we were going to plant. One of those things I think it always evolves as time goes on. But having looked at a lot of various publications of what we could grow, using my own knowledge of what I've grown in the past, we put together a spreadsheet with what we thought we grow and what was already there. Because that was the other important thing, was to look at what has already been growing there. Don't rip everything out and start again. For example, I mentioned earlier, there was a mulberry bush there. And obviously, being a play school, it was how we go around the mulberry bush. So I could see the context of why it was there. And it was lovely last year when Tess suddenly contacted me one day and said, "We've got mulberries." And, it's a great feeling. We had something we could harvest. So it's lovely. And now if we move on to the next slide, the challenges, I'm going to pass over to Tess to talk about our challenges, and there are many.
Thank you, Stefan. I guess it is really lucky that we're working in partnership with the council, but it does bring some difficulties sometimes. In that they're very busy people, it's hard to get hold of the right people to ask for things, and also we need to time our deliveries. Again, we're fortunate we are having our wood chip delivered free by them, but it's timing the wood chip deliveries. in coordination with our volunteer sessions every month, making sure we've got enough wood chip, not too much, so we're annoying people where it's being dumped and left. So it's timing all those things and getting hold of the right people from the council and building relationships with them, really, which is perhaps some of the challenge there. The council actually does the wood chip delivery and also mows the grass for us. So again, it's getting the grass mown by the very busy street scene staff just at the right time, and we just have to keep working on that, really. It's worked just in time so far, so we've been lucky. Volunteers, like everybody said, I think it's kind of we're so lucky to have a helpful group of people, and also we're lucky to have quite a diversity of people of different genders, different ages. We have a 2.5-year-old comes with his family, to people who are much older than that. I won't mention how old. And different abilities as well, not only in their experience, but their learning abilities and so on. So we do have that same group of people though, and it would be really nice to extend this out to members of the community that perhaps wouldn't normally think of volunteering in this kind of space. So to that end, we are having an event next week in partnership with the council, the social housing team. So they're inviting their tenants and just really trying to involve people that we might not reach otherwise. And that's open to all families as well for an Easter event at the community garden, the food forest. Like Clemence, I think, said, that open access to all at all times is wonderful, because anybody can come in the food forest at any time, but that means anybody can come in the food forest at any time. And we do find things moved quite a lot. So we might set up a structure for, I don't know, the bean poles, TP, and we'll go down the next week and it's all been scattered all over the food forest. Things are irresistibly drawn towards the pond to be thrown into that. But we just put them back and take them out and start again. And I think probably Stefan's and my idea is we put 5 plants of a species in and hope to get 1 or 2 that remain and get their roots down before they can be pulled out again. So I think part of that might be addressed when we get more information boards, because we haven't had any extra funding for those sort of things. And we're working on that with different funding sources. And I think perhaps when information boards are around more and people understand more what the food forest is for, it might be different. Who knows? We'll see. But we don't want to, we can't shut the gates. They're open like a public garden all the time anyway. So, and finally, then the last challenge probably is the weather. We don't have any water source on site, but we have installed a water butt at the social hall, which is just opposite the food forest. Apologise for my pings there, don't know how to turn those off. So we don't have water on site, but we could get water from our water butt across the road. But it really wasn't an issue last year. Everything seemed to grow fine because it was pretty damp, I know, in July and August. So we'll just have to see how that pans out. But of course, the weather does also affect our volunteer sessions. When we only have them once a month, then if it's really horrible weather, we might have to at the last minute cancel and just hold them on another day. And that is a whistle-stop tour of our challenges and how we've tried to address some of them. Thank you.
Great. Was that your last slide as well? Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. And thank you to all the speakers who have shared their experiences of doing community gardening in their local community. Before we go on to questions, I just want to quickly do the poll again, just before everyone disappears at the end and it's a rush. So Emma will just ping up another poll, which will pop up in a sec. Zoom likes to take its time, doesn't it?
Just having a little technical difficulty with it popping up. Oh, there we go.
There we go. Okay, so after listening to all the speakers tonight, and I think they've all been really different in their experiences, do you feel more able, inspired and confident to get involved with or bring new ideas to a community garden project? So a lot more, a little more, or you don't feel able? I'll just wait for that to scroll through. Brilliant. Thank you. So majority feel a little more able, with a few feeling not able, and then one not feeling more able, which is absolutely fine. No right or wrong answers. So thank you so much for answering that poll. So now on to the Q&A. We have had a number of questions in the chat. So I'll start from the top again, I think, because people have been waiting a little while for their questions to be answered. So the first one was from Carolyn. What ways have people found to attract, get and keep volunteers? I think Tess, you've just touched on that on the end there, but I'll open that up to all of you if you want to chip into that one.
Oh yeah, I'll do it from our perspective. We are lucky that we've got Devon Wildlife Trust volunteers officer and assistant to help us. They advertise, so we advertise on Devon Wildlife Trust's website through other various means as well when we recruit, but mostly through DWT's website. But I mean, Devon Wildlife Trust has, God knows, about 300 active volunteers at the moment. There's probably quite a few inactive, but some people volunteering for Devon Wildlife Trust, sort of nipping in and out depending on the things. So there's normally a sort of interest. I mean, quite often people just walk in and ask, or I'll get an email from the volunteers team saying somebody's expressed an interest. So thankfully, most of the time we've been okay. Especially sort of post-COVID, we had quite a lot of interest, and most of those people have since left again, and we've recruited again more volunteers. But generally, we've been okay. But again, we've had the support of Devon Wildlife Trust, so I'd imagine it's probably going to be a bit harder for other community groups trying to get some volunteers. Yeah,
thanks, John. What's Tess, Clemence, and Stefan's experience of retaining volunteers at your garden?
Few words here. Both Tess and I are on the steering group of the local biodiversity group, so we've got access to the membership there, to the newsletter, to the website. So we're able to sort of access people like that. Having said that, we still get that one set of people that come on a regular basis, and a few others drop in now and again. I think part of our problem is we only have monthly sessions. And we've been rained off a few times. And if people are going to come and then they get rained off, they still lose interest. Well, I think my biggest fear the first time we ran an event was that we'd had too many volunteers, because I was worried that we'd have sort of 20 or 30 volunteers come, and I only had, in my head, had worked enough for 6 or 7. Now, it wasn't an issue at the end of the day. We had about a dozen or 15 come, and we did have enough work. But I think it's matching the number of volunteers and the skill sets they have. For us, moving wood chip from the local car park into the wood, into the food forest, doesn't require a huge skill set, and most people can do it. But when it comes to, can you weed a few things out of that bed? And we are getting a small amount of weed material come up in our wood chip beds. Then the problem is a lot of people don't know which of the weeds and which of the plants are meant to be there. And if you're growing unusual plants, it becomes even harder. I have to look at them sometimes and think, no, I remember I planted something there. Yes, I think that's what it is. I've never grown it before, though. So that's a problem when we ask volunteers to do it.
Mm. I think it's looking outside the box as well, in terms of it doesn't have to just be those monthly, well, ours are monthly volunteer sessions, but also we did a one-off session with the Scouts group when there was a lot of, hedge cutting back to do. They just loved having hold of some tools and getting stuck into that, but could obviously only do it on an evening or a Saturday. We did that, and I'm an inveterate chatter, so I talk to lots of people locally and have made contacts with them. Somebody else, I think I can see further down the questions, is asking about young people in particular, involving them. So scouts is a good one to go for, and guides. And also, you know, through chatting, I made contact with a forest school teacher and a home educator group leader in Sidmouth. So I'm hoping that in the future we can kind of pull in people from different sectors like that, who might not come to a normal volunteer group, whatever that might be.
Yeah, Clemence, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think it's one of the key and the most important aspect of community gardening is working with the community and the group of volunteers. And in terms of recruiting them, we've been like, well, at the beginning being and still now a bit being proactive with like having stall at community events and talking about the garden, and that we have like a volunteer session, like social media, and also on the Good to Grow website you can advertise that. But I think the most for us, because we are in a public park as well with a lot of people passing by, that's a great advantage in terms of recruiting new people, because it's very visible. Some other projects garden are not visible, or as less visible. And then I think as John said, like I think is like having tea and cake, being very caring, being very attentive to the people when someone comes for the first time, like being and the following times being there, explaining how to do things, and like and there's loads of issue about like not knowing weed in bracket from the plant you grow. So it's like taking a lot of time actually of like well, kind of like a bit like teaching and training, but also being open to the other skill set people bring with them. There are loads of different skill sets, so being open to that. But yeah, definitely like tea and cake, social. We have a WhatsApp group. I think it's really nice as well, because where we can share information, people share pictures, and it's kind of a bit social, but on WhatsApp.
Yeah, thank you. And I think yeah, I think all of the above, everything that everyone said, if I could just add a few things as well, just from my experience of running a community garden. I think just, you know, communicating in different ways. So, you know, using posters, using social media, using websites, using you know, the local magazines or whatever it is, just using really different ways to, you know, using Facebook and things, because lots of people use communications in different ways, and some might not use social media, but they might look at a poster on a lamppost, for instance. So yeah, just thinking about how people are going to find out about you. And I think you know, Tess mentioned this, really is just having a range of opportunities as well. So it might be that every once in a while you mix it up, and, you know, in the summer have an evening session, or you know, just because, you know, not everyone can make the day that you have fixed, if that makes sense. So I think, yeah, having different times, different days, not so that it becomes impossible to know when actually the garden's open, but, you know, for volunteering. But I think, you know, it's just having those options open so that people can get involved. And I think, you know, in terms of retaining volunteers, yeah, I think the social side is super important. And I think really as well, one of the most important things is to you know, take on people's ideas and use their ideas, because then, you know, it feels like, you know, they've been listened to, and then they become a really valued part you know, of the group. So yeah, just making sure everyone's opinions and viewpoints and ideas are all sort of discussed or taken on board, or even put into action, I think is also really important as well. And yeah, I think Tess said this is reaching out to different organisations like the Scouts and other places where there are groups of people, and having open. I always found that open events were great. Open day events were like the days where we got new volunteers and they came back and they stuck with us and carried on, and they seem to be the way that we got our new volunteers. So yeah, lots of different ways, I think. So let's move on to another question. Okay, so how much time would you estimate it takes to coordinate the project now that it's set up? I think Jeremy actually asked this first to Clemence and then to Tess and Stefan. So now that it's set up, how much time a week do you have to contribute to it?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I also like John comment on like setting possible targets and not wanting to do too much because everything takes time. So well, I would say there's the gardening sessions with the practical physical work there once a week. I often go some of the time to harvest, for instance, for the shop, for the salad to bring to the shop. And then there's the work on like well, social media, some grant applications, some like doing posters, working with volunteers to plan something or an event. I would say it takes me a day a week, but it's also because I want to do it, and you can probably do less. But yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Clemence. What about you?
And sometimes more, and well, I don't know. But it can take. It can take a lot. I think it. But it's because I give it the time.
Yeah. So like 1.5 days outside of the normal.
Then you have to prepare the
gardening.
seedlings. We don't have a propagation place, so we do seedlings at home. Me and another friend from the garden, and so it's also like prep work before we do a crop plan. Week-long WhatsApps and messages and so on. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Clemence. What about Tess and Stefan? How much time do you think?
That's a real passion you got there, Clemence.
Yeah.
And commitment. But you so enjoy it, obviously. I think that was part of the reason why Stefan and I didn't really want to do an annual garden, because it can be a lot of work for 1 or 2 people doing the organisation and keeping an eye on it. We both live quite near to the food forest, but really it doesn't take us that long. I've been on my way home from work today and just gone and pulled up some grass and litter picked, and for half an hour. That's probably all it's gonna be this week, but we're very lucky in that so far it's not got any huge problems, and we don't have that huge glut of harvest all at one time. So it's a very different proposition, our garden, I think, really, which is handy for us. Are we lazy, Stefan? Are we just lazy?
Yeah, I don't think the word's lazy is efficient in actual fact.
Is that right? Okay. I'll take that.
Self-sustaining.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the answer when this was being asked, and I thought, how long do we spend there? And I thought, well, 2 hours, or is it? No, we don't. I probably don't spend 2 hours a week on it. And as Tess says, because we've focused on perennials and low maintenance, it doesn't take very long. The volunteer sessions, yes, we'll have a session and they'll last a couple of hours once a month, and we might get 12, 15, sometimes maybe 18 people there. The biggest job we've done, we've laid a hedge, and we had the local arboretum group come in and help with that, and that was quite a big job. But otherwise, no, it's not terribly time consuming at all. I think we spent more time drinking coffee, talking about what we'll do next than we've ever actually spent doing things.
And perhaps emailing the council.
Yes, emailing the council. And actually, going back on one other point that Tess made earlier about the level of sort of help we get from people moving things around the garden. I think that will cease eventually. Part of the problem is that we haven't got a lot in there at the moment. We've got lots of bare areas with wood chip in that will be planted up this year. I think once we've got a mass planting in there, it will be a lot easier. People won't be able to see things to move around. When you've got a big open field with just one stick sticking up the middle, it attracts little children to come and pull on it, you know. And I've seen young children in there pulling up, you know, plants. You can't curse at them really because they don't know that they're plants. They can just see a stick sticking out the ground, and as they run by, they grab hold of it. Once that stick is established, is well rooted in, it won't pull out, and it'll be a lot easier.
We just had Jeremy's just said, I don't know where, Jeremy, did you want to unmute yourself? Because you've just said, you know, about time being can be quite a challenge.
Can you hear me, right? Is that working?
Yeah, fine.
Hi, Jeremy.
Yeah, no. I suppose it's interesting, isn't it? Because we heard quite two different approaches there and two different models in terms of the sort of time commitment. I'm looking at an allotment type community garden sort of vision, if you like, that would look to really sort of take hold if you had a series of groups and people sort of taking part and participating and get really building up community engagement. But along the lines of Clemence's sort of area, something like that would genuinely represent a part-time job in itself. And she's looking at like a day a week. I'm thinking, yeah, that looks like what it would take to really get regular participation and involvement in a whole bunch of partners and groups in a garden. So it's whether some of these other community gardens that exist out there are there models that actually do operate on the basis of some kind of funded management and coordination.
You're halfway there in terms of your community orchard, Jeremy, already. You could make it a food forest or just add a couple of raised beds to that.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, in terms of just locally, obviously, we've got an existing group of volunteers that are involved in a whole bunch of other projects already. So what I'm looking at is something almost that sits alongside that, in addition to that. So I think I'd almost have to try to create some kind of second sort of volunteer group with a focus specifically on the community garden, if it is possible to do that. So that's just another challenge, really. That's the one thing in terms of looking to plan a project that really worries me, is trying to demonstrate to funders and partners the ability to come up with a sustainable management model that would really sort of give them confidence to get behind it.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna have to sort of mull that over and try and work something through.
Yeah, I think it's all about, just really thinking about that sustainability and what you can commit to now and potentially, in the future. And certainly, I think more community gardens. I've certainly heard of a couple that have got a funded role. They've decided to go down that route and get a funded role to do the coordination, because particularly I think when it's food growing, it is a lot of work, because you have to water them and just make it's more about tending the vegetables that you're growing, so it does take more time. But yeah, I think it's just being really sensible, and if you've got big ambitions, then that's probably going to take more time. But if you want to build slowly and sustainably, then that might be the route to go. And I think funders, they like to see something happening already, don't they? And then the sustainability of either building it up or keeping it as it is, or whatever it is, they'll they'll certainly come back to you if they think it's completely unreasonable in like the commitment and the time frame and the, you know, the volunteers and that kind of, you know, stuff. So yeah, I think it's just thinking sensibly about it really. And perhaps, you know, I liked actually Stefan and Tess that they sat down before they even did anything and wrote a management plan. Often that is the second thing people think about, but actually that's a really useful way to almost like just get all your ideas, all your vision really down on paper and actually go, okay, what is my next year looking like? What is my 3-year plan? You probably wouldn't want to go more than 5 years really. It really makes you think about that.
Yeah, my advice would be to look at a very small area, just a few square yards to begin with, and grow on that vegetables very biointensively. You know, most people get 2 crops a year out of their garden, out of their vegetable garden. I'd be saying, look, trying to get 5 or 6 crops a year out of every square yard of the land. But do it on a very small area and see how much you can manage and what the potential is. If you can then go back and demonstrate, look, on 5 square yards, we've grown 300 kilos of fruit and veg this year. You can go to a funder then and say, and if we scale it up, this is what we would get, and this is what it would cost.
And sometimes just looking at existing sites that are there. I mean, we were very lucky with ours in terms of it being a garden already, but you know, a bit like Incredible Veg, isn't it? Or Incredible Edible.
Incredible
Thank
Edible.
you. Yeah, Incredible Edible. You know, see if you can just take over a bed in the village where you are, Jeremy, you know, and just grow edible stuff, edimentals in that bed maybe, so that you can start getting people's interest in that and get, you know, a new group of volunteers who might not be involved in the other projects. Maybe just don't take on too much.
I've got my eyes on a site. I've got my eyes on a site. The church allotments are going to be turned into a community garden, but they don't know it yet.
I see.
Big plans.
But still, you know, even just do
half
of that site.
I think you can still build up from a small scale.
Yeah,
definitely. Don't take on
some
too
of the
much.
food forest principles and just put some little fruit trees in to start with, and then build up from there.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Right, I'm aware of time. Sorry, I know we're kind of taking our time to answer the questions, which is good. But there are a couple more questions. So there is a question about, are there many community gardens in Plymouth? And I would say yes. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I've certainly got a colleague that works closely with communities in Plymouth. So what I'll do is I'll ask her for some names of the community gardens that she knows of in Plymouth, and we can send that in an email after this webinar. Another question was, what would be a cheap way to create pathways? Anyone want to answer that? I mean, I would say wood chip is a pretty good way.
The beauty of wood chip is not only does it provide something that's sort of soft, spongy, and absorb, allows the water to percolate through. It feeds the soil as it breaks down. I mean, one of the things we've tried to do was by putting wood chip everywhere was to, yes, subdue the grass, but to get a nice soil going. And the 6 inches we put on now is just a few inches on top. But when you put a trowel into the ground, to put plants in, it's just full of worms. It's rich, it's dark, it's wonderful. But plants that are, you know, if you've got wood chip pathways, the plants that grow either side root under the pathways and get all that goodness out of the wood chip. And you just top it up every few years.
That's the only disadvantage I would say, Katie. You do have to keep topping it up if it's not so thick. But I mean, actually, we use in the food forest the other way around. We have the beds as wood chip, and we use grass paths in between. So as long as you can cut the grass paths, that's just a cheaper way of doing it, I guess. But you do have to keep on top of cutting them, unless you have very frequent visitors walking the path all the time.
Yeah. No, I like that. Turning it on its head, having wood chip in the planters and grass in the paths.
Sorry,
go on, John.
I was just going to say, we have grass path, which I mow, and we use wood chips on the beds. As Stephen said, weed suppressant, water retention during the summer, and of course it breaks down and provides nutrients to the soil. So putting that for just about order a bulk bag of bulk chips because it's more economical than buying small bags ad hoc. So yeah, I would advocate
Or
that.
get friendly with your local tree surgeon, because they always
Yes.
have bundles of wood chip. It might be
Yes.
a bit big, and you need
Yes.
to be
We
careful
had
what they're
we have a
chipping.
story with that. Chestnut trees came and did some tree work on the site and promised us a wood chip, and then somebody obviously asked for them and offered to pay, so we missed out on the wood chip.
Right, thanks everyone. Jeremy's asked another question actually to Stefan. He asked you to say more about your insurance. Does the group have to cover an annual premium for liability for injury, etc. on site?
Yes, we do, but because what we've done was, when we set the group up to begin with, we weren't affiliated to anyone. Although I was part of the biodiversity group, I'd set this up as a sort of a private enterprise, really. Tess got involved as well and helped find the site, but there was no plan to affiliate to anyone at all, and no thought of insurance really, until the council said, well, you are insured, aren't you? And I said, yes, I think we will be by tomorrow. So we had to go out and find someone to do it. The local arboretum, Sypamith Arboretum, agreed to sort of oversee our project at that stage, but then shortly afterwards became a charity, and their insurance no longer covered us. So it seemed wise at that stage to go back to the biodiversity group, of which, as I said, both Tess and I are on the steering group, and say, look, can we make this an official project? So although we're separate, we do go through them. But that's got some other advantages as well. Not only can we use their insurance, we can use their bank account as well. Because one of the things you start to look at, although we've tried to set up without any money at all being spent, you do occasionally have to go looking for funding, and we have been fortunate enough to have people volunteer to give us some money to buy some plants. But of course, they send you a check or whatever, want to pay it to an account, and if you haven't got an account, what do you do with the money? So we've piggybacked the biodiversity group's bank account as well. So the money that we put in there is ring fence, but we can access it. It works very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
Could I just ask a question? Is it what kind of constitution does the biodiversity group have then, Stefan?
I can send you a copy. In fact, if you go onto our website, SVBG website, I'll send it out later to Katie so it can be circulated.
I've put a link in the chat actually to the website as well, Stefan.
Yeah, okay. The constitution is on there in actual fact, so you can help yourself and have a look at it.
Okay, thanks.
But the other thing I would think about doing as well is thinking about risk assessments. Certainly the council wanted to have them, and it is quite important, again, from an insurance point of view. We might think we're doing it all right, but we've thought about everything. But if there were an accident, the first thing the insurance would want to do is to say, well, had you foreseen this? Had you taken sensible precautions? If you've got something in writing beforehand with the risk assessment, you can at least show you've done, you've had due diligence.
Yeah, absolutely. Risk assessments are, important. And, if you are stuck with risk assessments, then, the Wild Communities team can help with that. Another organisation that might be able to help with insurance is Community Action Group Devon. They help lots of groups with insurance as well. So another question, kind of a bit on the lines of health and safety really, but thinking about safeguarding when we're trying to welcome lots of different ages. So how do you encourage young people given there are safeguarding issues or potentially safeguarding issues? I mean, I'm happy to answer.
My answer would be make sure they bring their parents with them.
Yeah.
Or teachers.
Or teachers,
Yeah.
or scout leaders, or whatever.
Yeah.
It is an issue.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Stefan. I think, if you're going to have young people, as in under 18s, at your community garden, then they really need to be accompanied by an adult. And obviously, making sure that they are within the group and not doing one-on-one things with other members of the group, just making sure that they're part of the whole group as well. And just be really mindful about WhatsApp groups with younger people as well, because again, you need to be mindful of that kind of thing in terms of safeguarding. I think probably at some point this year, myself and my team will probably do some safeguarding workshop or session, because it is coming up again and again. And it is something to really consider and really be mindful of. But also, don't let it put you off either, because we want all people to be involved with these kind of things. But first port of call really is to have young people accompanied by an adult.
I think I would just add to that. If you
go on, Emma.
want to encourage people, encourage young people into your spaces, creating sessions that are, exciting for those people, putting on things that are specific or that people maybe have expressed an interest in doing, rather than trying to clump everybody together. Because obviously, like Katie said, you want to be encouraging, everybody into your space as much as possible, but people have got different interests, so just being mindful of that and tailoring what you're offering to who you want to be in the garden at that time.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Does anyone else want to offer anything on safeguarding? Cool. All right. Like I said, hopefully later on in the year we'll do something around that, I think, because it is a question that we're getting fairly often. So that's it, I think, for the main questions. We just had a comment at the end that someone said, I'm part of a community garden that has a group of volunteers who manage it. So it's not just one person doing this. So, spreading the load, spreading the responsibility. Plus, we have a management plan that everyone has bought into. Yeah, that sounds ideal.
I think there was just one quick question. I think it was touched on, but just to clarify, Stefan and Tess, is the garden open all the time for people to obviously just wander into, but are they able to work in it, or do you kind of
yeah, I mean, it's open for the public, but I don't see any reason why anyone couldn't work in it, but then we have no control over what they might do. So we have to just keep checking really backwards, into the garden ourselves fairly regularly, just to make sure that things haven't been put there that shouldn't, or things haven't been taken out. Not that we can do much about it really, but somebody did tidy up the pond for us, and we still don't know who that was. But there we are, the pond fairy.
I guess it's a similar question as well for yourself, Clemence, that you've got an open space that lots of people can access. Do you find that people go and work in it on their own?
Definitely, and I think it's I mean, like, member of the the core group goes whenever they can and do a bit of work. So it's like, it's open to them. But we also sometimes find that, last year we had like someone planting loads of chili, for instance, and putting label there and like with little messages. So yeah, people do come in and do plants and do not only harvest things, but also create new things, plant new plants and do a bit of work anytime.
I guess that can be the beauty of community gardening as well, can't it? That
definitely.
See it as their space too, which is, the aim of the game at the end of the day, isn't it? Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you everyone for your questions, and thank you to our speakers tonight. Yeah, really wonderful to have you along, and yeah, thank you for your time tonight. I'm just going to finish on just a bit of a promotion for our Wildlife Garden Award, because it is open to community gardens. It's really easy to achieve and it's free as well. We'll put a link either in the chat or after with the after webinar email that we'll send out. You can just go to our website, Devon Wildlife Trust, put in wildlife gardening, and it will come up. So yes, do feel free to have a look at that. And then if you feel like you're a bit more advanced, then we do have our Wilder Communities Award as well. Again, if you just go to Devon Wildlife Trust website and put in Wilder Communities Award, it will come up. This one really is more about, you know, the people side. I would say the Wildlife Gardening Award is more about what you're doing for wildlife, and the Wilder Community Award is more about what you're doing for people in your local community through your projects. But yeah, check it out online, and yeah. Just a few links here, and we'll send some more actually in the follow-up email. So there's our webpage, and also the Wilder Communities team email, so wildercommunities@devonwildlifetrust.org. We are here to help you with your community project ideas, so you know, do get in touch. And then just wanted to flag up about the RHS Wild About Gardens web pages, which is a joint partnership with the Wildlife Trusts. There's free downloads of booklets that you can get there. Their latest one is on slugs and snails, actually, so very appropriate. So yeah, lots of information and resources on there. And then I mentioned it earlier, John has achieved this for the Cricklepit Mill Garden. It might be worth looking at the RHS It's Your Neighbourhood Award. It's just another thing to really just, you know, raise the profile of your garden, get involved with another network and another organisation as well. So that might be a consideration as well. So we'll put a link to that in the follow-up email. As you disembark from the online room, there will be a survey. If you could fill out the feedback survey, we'd really appreciate it, because we do take all your comments on board and trying to improve the webinars going forward. But yes, thank you all for your time tonight. Thanks to speakers, thanks to Emma, and thank you everyone for coming along. Have a good evening.